did it. You finally did it. You had enough of the hot and cold and the push and pull and the mixed signals and the emotional confusion, and you decided to walk away or distance yourself. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped chasing. You stopped double texting, or in some cases, triple texting. Yeah, I see you. You stopped calling. Stopped trying to hold the whole connection together by yourself. You took a step back, maybe several steps back, and this time you mean it. Now, part of you thinks that your ex is just going to accept it and move on like nothing happened. Yeah, not so fast. Because when an avoidant realizes you've actually given up, not as a tactic, not as a bluff and not to get a reaction, but for real, what happens is very different from what they show on the outside. They may look calm, they may look unaffected, they may seem normal, but internally, something is happening. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the stages of what happens in an avoidant's mind when they realize that you've stopped fighting for the connection and you are truly letting go. If you're new here, hi, my name is Lucia. I'm a dating and relationship expert specializing in helping you get your ex back or to get over your ex. And if you're not new, you're part of my beautiful no contact army. Welcome back. I hope you've been a good little soldier and stayed in no contact. Okay, so the first stage is internal panic. Not obvious panic, not dramatic panic, not the kind of panic where they come running to your door, confessing their feelings. This is internal because avoidants are very good at hiding what they feel. They're good at acting normal. They're good at looking unaffected, but underneath that calm exterior, their nervous system is going into chaos. And why is that? Because the entire foundation of an avoidance distancing behavior is built on one core assumption, that you will still be there. So the reason that they're able to be hot and cold, inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or distant depends on the belief that the connection is still available to them whenever they want to come back. Predictability equals safety for them. So you become the emotional safety net. But when they realize that you are not just pulling back temporarily, but that you are actually done, that emotional structure starts collapsing. Their house of cards comes tumbling down. Now remember, one of the deepest wounds in avoidance is abandonment. So what happens when the person they felt safest with is now gone? That's when the shock begins. But panic is only the beginning. Once that initial shock hits, the avoidance starts doing what they do best, analyzing everything. And this is where they go into stage 2. They start replaying everything. They replay the last conversation. They rethink the last few weeks or months. They start wondering what changed. They look for clues. They become Sherlock Holmes. They monitor, they overthink, and of course they spiral privately. And yes, this is where the social media stalking ramps up. So they might analyze your stories, your posts, your caption, your tone, even the timing of what you post. They're trying to understand your emotional state without asking directly because, of course, direct vulnerability is too risky. Avoidants like to think their way out of emotional discomfort. They intellectualize. What made the shift? Did they go too far this time? Did you finally hit your breaking point? Did they lose someone who actually cared? Instead of reaching out directly, they'll try to gather that information from a distance. That's why I always say, do not post anything that looks like it's meant for them. Do not give them emotional breadcrumbs through social media. Let them sit in the uncertainty because uncertainty is something that avoidants do not handle well at all. They like being in control. They like knowing that the emotional door is still cracked open. And once that certainty disappears, that's when they start unraveling. And the more they analyze, the more they realize something they really don't like. They're no longer in control of the emotional distance. And by the way, if you would like help to get your ex back, avoidant or not, I do offer one-on-one coaching. You can go to theartoflove.net/coaching and we will send you the rates. They are not on the website. And the link is underneath every single video and podcast. Okay, so now stage 3, the loss of control hits them. And this is such an important point because avoidants don't just panic because they're losing you. They panic because they're losing control over the emotional distance. And that distance is what regulated them. It made them feel safe. So as long as they could pull away and trust that you would still be there, their nervous system stayed calm. But now the dynamic has changed. Now you are the one stepping back. Finally, you are the one becoming unavailable. You're the one choosing distance. And that flips the whole system. And suddenly, the avoidant can't regulate the way they used to because the role you played in that dynamic is gone. Your investment is what allowed them to stay guarded. Your pursuit allowed them to stay passive. Your emotional availability allowed them to stay emotionally lazy. But now they don't have that. And they have to sit with feelings that they were never planning on feeling, on dealing with. And this is where things start to get even more uncomfortable because once control slips, they're forced to feel what they've been avoiding. On to the 4th stage, which is forced emotional awareness. And this is where your absence gets even louder. So even if they still look fine on the outside, inside, they're now dealing with emotions that they spent years suppressing, feelings they avoided, and needs they denied. Their avoidance cannot protect them anymore the way it used to. They can't rationalize this one away. They can't just tell themselves that, oh, you were too emotional, too demanding, too much, or everything's fine, because now they are the ones feeling the impact of your absence. And here's the irony. Your absence now feels louder than your presence ever did. And that's when they start becoming more emotionally aware, whether they like it or not. And they start asking themselves questions that they normally wouldn't ask. Why aren't you reaching out? Why did you stop trying? Why didn't you answer? Did they underestimate how much you were carrying? Did they lose someone who really genuinely cared? And this is very uncomfortable for avoidance because introspection is not their strength. It's not where they like to live. They usually stay focused on managing distance, not examining themselves. But once you calmly remove yourself, they are forced into this self-confrontation. And of course, they hate that. And this is where the shift gets even more intense because what wounds an avoidant the most is usually not anger. It's your indifference. But before I tell you about that, I want to remind you that I have an app called Silencio that will help you to stay in no contact if you have distanced yourself from your ex. And you can get that on Android or iPhone. The link to that is, of course, underneath every single video and podcast. And if you still like to read, I do have a book, and you can check that out at nocontactsecrets.com, where you can read 2 free chapters before you purchase the book. Okay, so the 5th stage is when they begin to feel the consequences of your indifference. Now, avoidants can handle anger. They can handle emotional reactions. They can even handle conflict better than most people think. What they cannot handle well is indifference, because anger still means that you're attached. It means that they still matter. But neutrality, indifference, silence with no emotional chase behind it, yeah, that's what rattles them. Because most avoidants are used to partners continue to pursue, explain, protest, chase, or wait. So there's often this quiet subconscious arrogance underneath their behavior that assumes that your patience is endless, that no matter how much distance they create, how many times they create it, you're not going anywhere. So when you stop trying to keep the connection alive, that illusion breaks. And once it breaks, they're no longer dealing with your pain. Now they're dealing with their pain and their loss. And that's a different experience, because now they have to confront what they destroyed, what they neglected, what they took for granted. And avoidants do not like looking in that mirror. And once they're sitting in that indifference, they begin to see your value in a way that they never fully did when you were still there. The sixth stage is perspective. Distance gives them perspective in a way that closest didn't. When you were there, available, trying, understanding, forgiving, hanging on, they couldn't really fully appreciate your value because your presence, it felt permanent. But once you step away, now they have to experience life without you. Now they begin to understand what you brought into their life. Finally, they start missing not just your attention, but your understanding, your acceptance, the fact that you saw them and didn't judge them. And more than that, they start missing the version of themselves that they were when they were with you. That version felt understood. That version felt safe enough, even briefly, to lower their guard. That version felt connected, even if they struggled with intimacy. And that version now feels out of reach because you held the key to that side of them. And when you walked away, you took that key with you. And this is why the loss starts hitting differently. But realizing your value doesn't mean they're suddenly going to come in with honesty and vulnerability. They're going to do what avoidants usually do. They're going to test the door. So the seventh stage is testing. And this is when they usually start to reappear. But don't expect some grand romantic gesture. Don't expect some sweeping apology or a dramatic emotional confession. That would require too much vulnerability and risk. So instead, they test the door. They like a post. They watch your stories. They react to something small. They send a neutral message, a meme. They say something casual like, hey, saw this and thought of you. And that's because they want to know whether they still have access to you. They want to know if the door is really closed or if it might still be a little bit open. And they do this because they're terrified of rejection. If they came in with full honesty and you shut them down, it would hit them hard. So they protect themselves, keeping it light, vague, and deniable. That way, if you don't respond, they can pretend that, oh, it meant nothing, it was just a meme. But make no mistake, it meant something. Trust me. They're testing whether they still matter to you, whether they can still reach you, whether you're really gone. And if that testing phase tells them that you're really pulling away, this is when the final realization starts to hit. And that is clarity. When you were still tolerating the hot and cold and you were absorbing their inconsistency and carrying most of the emotional weight, they couldn't see clearly. Your presence gave them comfort, but it also allowed them to stay asleep, so to speak. Now, your absence wakes them up. When you let go, they finally get the clarity that they could not access while you were still around. Now they see what you were. Now they understand what they had, and now they feel what your absence means. And this is when many of them start trying to come back. So if you're sitting there wondering whether your absence matters, whether no contact is actually doing anything, whether giving up actually changes the dynamic, I can tell you that yes, it does. Because once an avoidant realizes that you were a gift and not a guarantee, that's when the panic starts. And that is also when things begin to turn around. So now I'd like to hear from you. Do you have any questions or comments on anything I've said? Please comment below and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos or episodes if you're listening to this as a podcast. And finally, remember, love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.